What's up YouTube, it's your boy Nasho. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another episode of WWE's Biggest Issue. This week's episode is actually the fallout from NXT War Games, with the question being, was it as we expected? As you guys know, War Games, the NXT pay-per-view known as War Games, started all the way back in 2017. Which, I'm actually gonna look up the card. I'm actually going to... Here we are. So, NXT War Games had started all the way back in 2017, and it's interesting. It's interesting because the cage itself. The match itself, known as War Games, started all the way back in 1987 and created by the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and it was sort of like a... It was kind of like... It was basically a double steel cage, basically. And now, over the years, NXT has had quite a few War Games matches, and as I mentioned, It was derived from an old match type that was created by Dusty Rhodes back in 1987, and it was used by the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, which then became a staple for WCW, which WWE had acquired back in 2001. By the time we got to NXT 2017, there was supposed to have been a takeover known as NXT TakeOver Houston at the Toyota Center, but they changed it to War Games, where it would consist of 3 teams. It would consist of 3 teams: the Undisputed Era, the Authors of Pain and Roderick Strong, and Sanity. And you guys know how that match ended. And there were rumors that last year's War Games was supposed to take place somewhere else. No one knows where. But because of the pandemic, that did not come to pass. Now, obviously, it had taken place... It had taken place inside the Performance Center in Orlando. And it's interesting because originally it was supposed to have been known as TakeOver War Games, but because that it's NXT 2.0, it did not come to pass. Now, for those who knows nothing of War Games, I'll explain how it works. So the concept of it is this, and this is actually from an article that I found online. So the way that War Games works is this. It says the event centers on the War Games match, and the main event of each show is contested in the structure itself. The War Games match is a type of steel cage match, except there are 2 rings positioned right next to each other, and the roofless rectangular cage surrounds the edge of both rings. The match consists of 2 or 3 teams with between 3 and 5 participants on each team facing off with each other in a staggered entry format. At the start, 1 member from each team enters the cage. After 5 minutes, a member from an opposing team enters the cage, meaning whichever team has the advantage, that team will give their member the go to enter War Games, which would give them a temporary 2-on-1 advantage. After 2-minute intervals, alternating team members, so going like this, will be allowed to enter the match. Once all the participants have entered, War Games begins. And of course, the only way to win is by pinfall or submission. Funny enough, back in the days of WCW, back in the days of WCW, both teams would face each other in the cage until one superstar would either tap out, would surrender, or is knocked out cold. No pinfalls, no countouts, no disqualifications. However, later WCW versions began to allow pinfalls, which continued with NXT's version. So in this case, once all the superstars enter, War Games begins. No countouts, no disqualifications. Only way to win is by pinfall or submission. However, if a member of a team escapes the cage, their whole team is done. They lose easily. In which the first War Games event actually took place in 2019, which was pretty crazy. So the first War Games event had was actually, again, as I mentioned, inside the Toyota Center in Houston back in 2017, and the card itself consisted of this: Ruby Riott versus Sonya Deville, Pete Dunne versus Johnny Gargano for the NXT UK Championship, Lars Sullivan against Cassius Ohno, Aleister Black versus the Velveteen Dream, Ember Moon versus Kairi Sane, Nikki Cross, and Peyton Royce. Andrade against Drew McIntyre for the NXT title, and of course the last match was obviously for the NXT Women's title, and then of course the War Games match, which featured the Undisputed Era, the Authors of Pain with Roderick Strong, and of course Sanity, that featured Alexander Wolf, Eric Young, and Killian Dane, which was a hell of a card. But 2018 was where things got really interesting. And I remember this clearly because I remember watching it back when it was on the WWE Network, and it was absolutely insane. So we had Keith Lee versus Fidel Bravo, which I believe that was a part of the pre-show. I presume. I don't remember. Lars Sullivan against Keita Murray, which I believe was part of the NXT brand. I'm not so sure. I don't know if that was on NXT TV or what. Nikki Cross versus Candice LeRae, Matt Riddle versus Cassius Ohno, which that was a funny one. Shayna Baszler versus Kairi Sane, 2 out of 3 falls for the NXT Women's title. Aleister Black versus Johnny Gargano, Tommaso Ciampa versus the Velveteen Dream for the NXT title, and then of course the Viking Raiders, Ricochet and Pete Dunne against the Undisputed Era, obviously inside of War Games, and of course we all know how that match ended. Moving into 2019 from a couple years ago, it was quite the interesting card, to say the very least. We had Angel Garza versus Isaiah Swerve Scott. We had Team Ripley, which was Rhea Ripley, Candice LeRae, Tegan Nox, and Dakota Kai. Originally, it was supposed to have been Mia Yim, but of course, because that Dakota Kai took out Mia Yim, that did not come to pass. Against Team Baszler, which was the NXT Women's Champion, Shayna Baszler, Bianca Belair, Io Shirai, and Kaylee Ray. Then we had Pete Dunne, Damian Priest, and Killian Dane, where the winner would face Adam Cole for the NXT title the next night at Survivor Series. Finn Balor versus Riddle. And then, of course, Team Ciampa versus the Undisputed Era. Team Ciampa consists of Tommaso Ciampa, Keith Lee, Dominic Dijakovic, or I guess now T-Bar. And the return of Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens ended up being a part of War Games last year. Hell of a showing by by KO. But moving into last year's War Games, I would consider this to be one of the more weirder cards of the entire, out of every single takeover. I would consider this to be one of the weirdest, cards I had ever seen. So we had Legado del Fantasma versus August Gray, Kurt Stallion, and Ashante the Adonis, all three of which are no longer with WWE, which is unfortunate. Then, of course, we had Team Candice versus Team Shotzi. Team Candice consisted of Candice LeRae, Dakota Kai, Raquel Gonzalez, and Toni Storm. Team Shotzi consisted of Shotzi Blackheart, Ember Moon, Rhea Ripley, and Io Shirai. So Rhea Ripley, 2 War Games matches for her. Quite the resume. Then, of course, we had Tommaso Ciampa versus Timothy Thatcher, which was won via pinfall. And what's interesting about that was that match was based on respect. They ended up respecting each other to the point where they ended up becoming a tag team. And now with Thatcher no longer in the picture, Ciampa is now NXT champion. So what does that say about him? So what does that say about Thatcher? Then, of course, we have Dexter Lumis versus Cameron Grimes in a strap match. Then, of course, we had Johnny Gargano versus Leon Ruff and Damian Priest, which was a triple threat match for the North American title, which ended up being, well, Ghostfaces. Then, of course, we had the Undisputed Era versus Team McAfee, which consists of Pat McAfee, Pete Dunne, Danny Burch, and Oney Lorcan, who of which is no longer with WWE. Neither is Adam Cole or Bobby Fish, which is unfortunate. And then if you look at last night's War Games card, last night's War Games was just stupid. I'm just gonna be real. This was not what we had expected. So apparently the dark match was Odyssey Jones against Andre Chase, which was kind of funny. We all know how that match went. But I'm looking at this card right now. This was not what we expected. So to give you guys an idea of exactly what the hell happened, the team, it was so the first War Games match was Cora Jade, Io Shirai, Kaylee Ray, and Raquel Gonzalez against Dakota Kai and Toxic Attraction. The match ended with Cora Jade pinning JC Jane to win War Games for her team. Understand that this match lasted only 30 minutes. Only 30 minutes, whereas opposed to the men's War Games match, it ended with 40. It only lasted 40 minutes, which is usually typical. I'm gonna be honest, this was not what we had expected from this was not what we were expecting, because if you look at the 8 women that were in this match, you look at Cora Jade, who is the youngest member in this match at only 21 years old. You have Io Shirai, who's been in not one, not two, but 3 War Games matches, this one included, who is actually the longest reigning NXT Women's Champion in history. You have Kaylee Ray, who's the longest reigning NXT UK Women's Champion ever, and this was actually her second War Games match in her career. Then you have Raquel Gonzalez, who was NXT Women's Champion throughout this whole year until Dakota Kai came in and stopped her reign dead in its tracks. Then you have Dakota Kai and Toxic Attraction, Mandy Rose, her first title run being the NXT Women's title. Then, of course, you have Gigi Dolan and JC Jane, who we don't know much about them, but the only thing we know is that they're the current tag team champions. And Many people wanted to see Dakota Kai and Toxic Attraction win the match, but they didn't get it. Cora Jade pinned JC Jane with a broken arm. And she barely did, and here's the funny thing about it. She barely, and I was watching that match very closely, she barely did a thing. Barely did a thing. Maybe get a few kendo shots in, a table shot in, but that was it. That was it. That was it. Honestly, I don't even know how to describe that matchup, but it was just it was just stupid. I'm being real. Don't get me wrong. War Games is always nuts. It's absolute madness. Don't get me wrong on that. But to be honest, the way this match ended, I feel like as if Raquel Gonzalez should have pinned Mandy Rose. That way, she could get her rematch for the NXT Women's title, or Io Shirai could have pinned either JC Jane or Gigi Dolan. That way, she could get her rematch for the tag titles alongside Zoe Stark once her knee was healed. And then of course you got Imperium versus Kyle O'Reilly and Von Wagner. This was pretty much exactly as we had expected, given the fact that Imperium have been extremely dominant. They've been extremely dominant since aligning themselves with Walter a number of years ago when Imperium started. So for them to be extremely dominant at this stage in their career, absolutely incredible. And then of course Kyle O'Reilly and Von Wagner, we knew at some point that their team was not gonna last very long. But there's been reports actually saying that Kyle O'Reilly's contract is set to expire this month, and apparently he has I believe he has yet to sign a new contract with WWE. But then again, Johnny Gargano actually also, I actually talked about it before. He signed a 1 week extension. Excuse me, for him to work War Games with the contract having expired this past Friday. So that says a lot. That literally says a lot. And he mentioned as NXT War Games went off the air, he mentioned that he wanted to reveal what was going on, what was going through his mind, and we don't know what he has to say. But I do also want to point out that the update on Raquel Gonzalez after the women's War Games match is that she had to have 10 stitches following the match at War Games, which was just absolutely nutty. Absolutely insane. But yeah, again, going back with the tag team title match, we knew Wagner was gonna attack Kyle O'Reilly, but Kyle actually saw that one coming. He saw that coming. Even I saw that coming. When I saw Von Wagner on SmackDown, we knew it was going to happen. We knew that he was going to turn his back on Kyle O'Reilly. Kyle was having none of that bullshit, and now tomorrow night on NXT, it'll be a steel cage. So I'm very curious as to what we could expect. And I believe, and I mentioned before that I didn't remember what the that other steel cage match was. I believe it's Santos Escobar and Zion Quinn. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but you guys can comment below if I'm wrong. But next up, we have Cameron Grimes versus Duke Hudson, or I guess Brendan Vink, if you guys remember that name. Hair versus hair. It's very rare you would ever get a hair versus hair match, but there's been quite a few over the years. This one was kind of a downer. Honestly, we knew Cameron Grimes was gonna win. We all knew, so I'm not even gonna say anything about it except the fact that this is far. This rivalry is far from done. And then of course we have Roderick Strong against Joe Gacy for the NXT Cruiserweight title. This was actually the first time in history that the Cruiserweight Championship weight limit had actually been lifted. So it was kind of interesting because Joe Gacy was like is like in the 232 is like the 230 240 range. Roderick Strong is literally is at the 205 weight limit, which is pretty crazy. But we knew that Strong was going to retain. Not even going to say anything about it, but we then move into the men's War Games match. Team 2.0, Team Black and Gold. Team 2.0 consists of Braun Breaker, Grayson Waller, Tony D'Angelo, and the NXT North American Champion Carmelo Hayes. Team Black and Gold consisted of Johnny Gargano, Pete Dunne, LA Knight, and the NXT Champion Tommaso Ciampa. I'm gonna be completely honest. I'm going to be completely honest here. This match was utter bullshit. Okay, it was utter bullshit because there were so many different variables that went on with this match. Number one is the fact that Trick Williams got involved in the match, even though it was no countouts, no disqualification. He still got involved. Kept throwing in weapons, chairs and trash cans and kendo sticks and tables. But I feel like as if had Trick Williams and Dexter Lumis not have gotten involved, not have been at ringside, this could have had a different outcome. Because one of the big things that I also noticed as well was the fact that Tony D'Angelo decided to take a chain and a lock and lock the door shut. Literally padlock the door, which forced LA Knight to literally improvise and climb, literally scale the cage and get inside of War Games. And another thing is that when Braun Breaker, no pun intended, broke the chains off, he used his overwhelming power to just break it off. And then the last thing that I do want to point out as well is that was the closing moments of the match. And I did talk about this in my result video from last night. DIY hit Braun Breaker with Meet Me in the Middle, typical DIY fashion. As they pinned Braun Breaker, Carmelo Hayes ripped the referee from his 3 count, and he smiled at it. He was like, "Yep, I did that." Johnny Gargano sacrificed himself to allow Ciampa to hit Carmelo Hayes with the Psycho knee, which allowed Ciampa to potentially hit Hayes with the fairy tale ending, but a spear through the table by Braun Breaker, power slam, gave him the victory. That right there was the most bullshit ending I had ever seen, ever, because it's as I said, had Trick Williams not have gotten involved, Team Black and Gold could have won that. Team Black and Gold could have won that, and had Carmelo Hayes just been knocked out for some weird-ass reason, Black and Gold would have won. I'm being honest. I'm being completely honest. that was the most bullshit ending I had ever seen. As was the women's War Games match. I think out of all the matches that were on the card, the big match, the one match that was the sleeper match of the card was the match for the NXT Tag Team titles, because of the fact that Imperium, they've been in the ring with Kyle O'Reilly before, but they did not know what Von Wagner was about, and they now know what Von Wagner can do in the ring. And we've seen Wagner in the past, even last year, when he was on, when he competed on Raw and SmackDown a few times, as like a local competitor or something, is what they call him nowadays. He was pretty impressive, I will say. But my question, so now the question remains: was this card the best card we had ever seen? No, I think this was the worst NXT War Games card ever. This was the worst War Games card ever for pretty much all the reasons that I had talked about. With the fact that Cora Jade picked up a weak victory, with the fact that she picked up a weak victory, with the fact that Cameron Grimes, the match between Grimes and Hudson didn't even go the distance at War Games, with the fact that Roderick Strong literally buried Joe Gacy to the point of no return, and with the fact that Team 2.0 buried Team Black and Gold without Team Black and Gold making Team 2.0 the top stars. It was just absolutely pathetic. I'm being real. This was probably one of the most pathetic War Games, or rather the worst NXT War Games card we had ever seen ever. And there's also been rumors, and speaking of Gargano, there's also been rumors saying that he's going to be, that he's going to be leaving WWE, but there's also rumors as well that he's actually currently working on a new contract with WWE, so he is in talks with WWE, but as far as we know, he's done, as far as we know. But that brings me to the question of the day: What were your guys' thoughts on this card? And it's the same question as last time. Was it exactly as you expected, or did you expect something different? Let me know in the comments below, and that is going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button. If you guys are new to the channel and you guys want more episodes of WWE's Biggest Issue, which get posted every Monday, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you guys don't miss out on any new content that comes your way. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. All the links will be down in the description below. And if you guys have any family that you want to send me and want me to open up on the channel, my address will also be in the description as well. And on that, this is your boy Nash, signing out.